Good morning, good morning, good morning. So it's hard to follow up behind all that good praise and worship and that wonderful news. Congratulations on your single. I hope that it does very well for you. Thank you. And I was told to let you know that there's coffee in the back when we take our break. So. And cream and sugar. So. There are three concepts that I want you to wrap your brains around, and they're going to be foundational. And in some ways, they're going to feel different for you. But one is that church is a business. Yeah, it is a business. And with any business, any enterprise, your revenue, we say treasure, has to be more than your expenses, or you're going to have problems. And we're all believers, and we believe God is going to come through, and he does, but faith without works is dead. So we want you to get the foundational pillar to build from, that church is a business. The second thing I want you to wrap your mind around is the 3 C's. Congregants are your customers and your clients. And if you were to go and shop somewhere, or go to a store, go get a service, you don't want to spend your dollars if you're not treated right, if you don't feel honored, appreciated. And so we've got to think about that every time someone comes to our doors to worship. And even if they don't come to our doors, what we put out, and what they learn about us reputationally, is everyone welcome? All of those things will determine how many customers, clients, and congregants that you have. And the third thing I want you to wrap your brain around is that finance is a ministry in and of itself. The same way the care team, the sick and shut-in team, the team that goes and does prison ministry, the prayer team, finance is a ministry as well. And if we can accept these 3 things, and if you feel tension with them, at least marinate on them. Think about them, meditate on it when you leave. And I mentioned yesterday, I'm going to start off here. I mentioned our Fiscally Fit ministry, and we call it a ministry. And one of the cornerstones of our Fiscally Fit ministry is the Financial Peace class. It's a 9-week program. The only thing we have them pay for is their supplies. That's why you see the $99. But the first time we offered this, we had over 120 people take it. So I have 2 other people who teach it with me as well. Charlotte Oney, she's the treasurer of our finance team, and she's a VP at Bank of America. Demetrius Ingram is on the count team, and he's a business consultant at Chick-fil-A. So we come in and we share knowledge, and because one of the things that we don't get, especially in our community, is financial literacy. And so we want to make sure that we help people, that we give them the information, that we help them, we teach them budgeting. So there is a church called Glen Arden. Have you all heard of it? And so Glen Arden doesn't do capital campaigns. They take in $40 million a year in revenue. And this is a black church. And they said that when they started teaching financial literacy and treating it as a ministry, that as they strengthened their congregants' financial status, they were able to give more. And as a result, they saw their revenue increase dramatically. And so we want to think about it as a ministry, make sure that we give and that we allow them to budget, show them how to budget, how to have a household budget, not to be saddled with debt. And as you start to do those things and treat it as a ministry, you will see your revenue and your treasure increase. Another thing we do with Fiscally Fit is we do panels throughout the year. So this was a panel we did, Entrepreneurship, Defining and Financing Your Dream. Can you imagine a church helping their congregants start businesses, pushing them to think about it and take that leap of faith? So we assembled a panel of key influencers to help impactors. We invited the community to come in as well. But the first person is he was a Wall Street banker. He became a real estate developer. The second person, Corey Townsend, is a small business lender. The third person, Andra Hall. Have you all been to Atlanta and gone to Cami Cakes? Yeah, so that's the founder and owner of Cami Cakes. Jewel Burks is a young sister who started a technology company that she ended up selling to Amazon. And then John Hurt owns 15 McDonald's franchises. And Sarah Latimer owns a marketing company. So we brought these people together to tell our worship community how they went about starting their businesses. How did they define them? What pushed them to take the entrepreneurial leap? So we wanted our people to have that information as well. So that's another thing that we do with Fiscally Fit. And we don't just focus on adults. We also do youth as well. So this is a 2-week seminar. Tonight is the last night, but it's focused on high school students. We do it in conjunction with SunTrust Bank. And we're teaching them financial literacy at a very young age, which will positively impact their financial trajectory for their lives. So I don't want us to just focus on adults, but we also want to make sure that the youth get it at a very, very early age. And this is a picture of our youth in a Fiscally Fit class. So I wanted to share that with you to let you know that at the end of the day, this is going to give you the foundation to have a better P&L, profit and loss statement. The more that you get your community in fiscally fit shape, the more that they can give as well. And that's not the only reason we're doing it. We certainly believe in holistic salvation at Impact. And you can't be suffering financially and your spirit and your soul be okay. So we want to heal the whole person. So finance is a pillar of holistic salvation. So is relationships, career, and we focus on all of those things. And we're starting to really reap with our treasure that we see. I think there was a question here. Customer, client, congregants. Uh-huh. So we have to know where we are before we can know where we can realistically go. And part of an effective budgeting process is to know where you are and to constantly project where you think you're going to go and compare that to the budget. So I'm going to share a couple of analyses that I do routinely in hopes that you can take some of these elements and put them at your church as well. So one of the things that I'm always doing is looking at how we end a quarter. And you see 2018 projections, so second quarter treasure, second quarter expenses, second quarter net income. And you want to compare it to the year before to see how you're trending. And then you want to project out your full year, which is that last column. So based on the trends, I'll look and see what we did the first quarter, what we did the second quarter, how they compare to last year. Make a projection as to how we will end the year. And if you need to do anything to cut expenses so that you end the year within your targeted net income, now's the time to do that. And you want to constantly do this type of analysis. So we don't want to look up and it's December 1st, and we're like, oh, God, we're $500,000 off. You want to look at that information in June. And you're going to have to make the bold decisions. If you're not trending how you want to trend, what do we do at that point? And when you start, we start our budget process for the next year. We start that around July. So we're looking at June, where we are, where we're trending. Will we be able to end the year where we plan this year? And then that's going to drive the next year as well. And so we start talking about budgets, making decisions. It goes through the finance team, then it goes to the executive leadership team, and we have a leadership team as well. I think you guys may call them trustees. So it goes through all of that. And then we will have numbers that we break out and give to the teams to say that this will be your budget for the next year. And you've got to decide how you're going to allocate this amount. But we also have them write a strategy too. So how are you going to use those funds? We're not going to just give them to you, but how are you going to use those funds? What's your strategy for the year? So if you have a youth ministry and you want to go out and recruit, then your budget should reflect that. Or if you like to have food every time you meet, then I don't want to see $100 as your food item for the year, your line item. Yeah, it has to reflect that as well. So knowing where you are, what your trends have been, will determine where you can go. And after we go through that process, yes?
So you build the base budget from the trending from the prior year and then give it to the team. You don't get the strategies from the team to feed into the budget?
So there is monies that we will allocate for strategic initiatives. So if there's something different that the team wants to do, above and beyond their regular operations, then they would have to submit a request for access to those strategic initiative dollars. Yeah. But we don't want to just give them to you. You've got to have a compelling reason. And the reason you want to put aside money for strategic initiatives as well is that you always want to be forward-thinking. You want to take some risks to grow the ministry, to reach people. So we don't want to, a budget isn't going to be like a straitjacket that's going to hold you. So there are some ways that, if you feel strongly about something, there are ways to have it incorporated into the budget. Any other questions?
Do you have your teams come up with ways to help raise the budget, or it just comes strictly from the tithes and offerings?
So a little bit of both. Yeah, so if you think about the van campaign that we shared with you, that did not come from our operating budget. If you have a capital campaign, that wouldn't come from the operating budget. And a little later, we're going to get into restricted and unrestricted dollars, and so that'll come into play at that time. So a good budget starts with what you think your revenue/treasure will be. And after you've gotten an idea how you're trending in your current fiscal year, compared to the year before, so are you trending up compared to last year? Are you trending down? That'll give you an idea as to what you can do for the following year. And sometimes you've got to plan your budget flat. Sometimes you're trending down and you've got to reduce your budget. And we hate to make those big decisions, those hard decisions. And it doesn't mean your faith isn't strong if you have to reduce your budget. Yeah, it doesn't mean that. It just means that we're being good stewards and we're being smart. So I mentioned to you that I was in the music industry. So if you're trending off your revenue projections, in the music industry, you can say, I'm going to put out another album. Let me pull this artist out and put out an album. And it's not that easy in a church if you're not trending correctly. Yeah, it's not that easy. And a lot of times our clients, customers, congregants, they get fatigued by all the asking. And especially if you can't show that you've been good stewards and that you're on top of the business. So we want to look and then determine what our next year's budget is going to be. And you want to make sure that you hit all components of the budget too. At Impact, every single ounce of square footage is multi-purpose, multi-use. And so a lot of you have assets that sit Monday through Saturday that could be revenue generating for you. And because we're only thinking about Sunday, we're losing that opportunity. Can you have a coffee shop in your kitchen during the week? Are there nonprofits that maybe need a space that you can rent to? And that can give you revenue Monday through Saturday. Your mortgage payment is going to be the same. If your building sits empty those other 6 days, or if you utilize them. So start thinking about what do you have and how do you get more out of what do you have. Think about it as a business. It doesn't mean we're not trusting God, that we're not saints. Doesn't mean that. But let's get multiple revenue out of these assets while we have them. Don mentioned yesterday that we rent our vans. Yeah. You can rent them as opposed to just having them sit there. They cost you the same amount. So your insurance will cost, but you have insurance. Yeah, you would pay a little more. But you're going to say that, when I rent it, I need that these are the costs, wear and tear on your vehicles. Your insurance increases some, but you cover all of that with the rental rate that you charge. Yeah. But we want to make sure that we're getting as much revenue as we can. We have what we call M Cafe on Sundays. We're selling chicken and waffles. You come in here, you can buy some chicken and waffles. You can buy Cammy cakes. We were the first off-site franchise location that she did. You can buy cupcakes, quiche in the morning, coffee. And most churches have kitchens. You can do that. Well, and we transitioned from giving it away. So we started a 8 a.m. worship experience. We wanted people to come early. And so we gave away free coffee and donuts and free waffles. And after they started coming for a while, we took that back. And they happily paid for it. Yeah. Yeah. They've gotten used to eating now in the morning and drinking coffee. But we were thoughtful and strategic about it. Yeah. Yeah. And once you know what your treasure is for the year, then you can get to your expenses. You can start thinking through expenses. And what do you think is the biggest line item for a church? Yes. And usually personnel costs on average are about 50%, 50 to 55% for a church. And when we share, I tell you that we're a very, very transparent church. So we go in, we show what the pastoral staff's budget is, including their salaries. And I think that that makes, I mentioned that churches have, in some ways, a sullied reputation because so much has been taken at the top. But you can, eliminate that from happening by sharing that type of information. And you want to make sure that you have all expenses too. If you want to do missional work, you want to budget for it. Marketing. So one of the things that we do, if you look at the last line item there, cash reserves / savings, you want a budget to save. It's no different than you as an individual, not living paycheck to paycheck. So you budget, you pay yourself off your salary. You want to pay yourself at least 10%. So we tithe our 10% too. You can't ask the congregation to give and then the church doesn't tithe. So between apportionments, missional work, it was always important and impacts DNA to tithe as well. And we take that money and we give back. But if you were to plan to save, then your net income should always have a built-in buffer. So I want you to start, when you do your budget and you budget your expenses, also budget savings as well. And that gives you a buffer. But it also forces you to save. And what we're going to do when we talk about restricted and unrestricted funds, I'm going to tell you why that's important. So we also even budget for helping people who want to come into the ministerial area as a career. We call it pathways, but we even start budgeting to help recruit and support them as well with their testing, their school supplies, whatever, so that we're helping to fuel the next generation of leaders. And you always want to budget a positive net treasure. And you know that, and as you start to do the projections that I showed, to do your full year projections, you can see where you're trending it, whether or not you're going to have net treasure. But you never, ever want to have zero as your net treasure or a negative number. Or we're not being good stewards. Any questions? I'm seeing some quizzical looks.
But treasure means what now?
So instead of, because we are a church, it is a business, we use treasure in place of income. Yeah. So net treasure would be the same as net income. You're probably more familiar with hearing that. So it's revenue less expenses equals net income. Treasure less expenses equals net treasure. And as we accept that church is a business, as I stated early on, you know that your expenses have to be less than your revenue. And if that happens, you'll always have net treasure. And you want to build in that buffer through savings and reserves, as I showed. Force us as an organization to have the discipline to save and not spend everything that comes in. So when we teach Financial Peace University, a lot of those same principles would apply to a business. Your individual household is no different than the church's household. So if you're at home, you don't want the kids leaving the lights on all night. You don't want them to leave the AC on when they leave the house. Same thing happens for the church. And if people don't give to the church, then we can't keep the lights on for them. When it's hot, we can't cool it. Yeah. There's a question in the back?
So the question with the savings, do you also push to have an endowment fund? I know most black churches, we always have a building fund, but we never have an endowment fund.
Mm-hmm.
Do you all have an endowment fund, or
No, we do have endowment as well. It's not as significant as we want it to be, but we do have monies in there with the United Methodist Foundation. And then we also own some stock as well. And that is in our foundation, in our endowment. So stocks and also money. It's another question?
Yeah, I'm wondering, I know in some other denominations, not only do you can also make money in other ways, and I don't believe we do this as Methodists, but like, for instance, the workshops or book sales or different things like that under a different name. So like it's TD Jakes Ministries or whatever. Do we do that?
So yes, we do that. There's a threshold that you hit. And as long as you don't hit that threshold, which is like $125,000, once you hit that threshold, then it becomes an unrelated business income tax issue. And then you would want to have it as its own separate business. But as long as you're not hitting that threshold, you can have all those revenue streams coming in within your organization. When you hit that threshold, there's still some things you can do to decrease. So for example, we rent out our facilities. I said everything is multi-use, multi-purpose. But if you're a nonprofit renting to other nonprofits, then the revenue you get from another nonprofit can reduce the calculation of your unrelated business income tax. But good question.
Will you go into more detail about what you mean by the 3 C's? What do they actually mean?
So they're all one and the same, but a lot of times we think about members, congregants, as, you know, that they owe us, as opposed to us being grateful that we have clients and customers who come. So they're no different than someone going into Kroger. You think about them that way. So, you know, Nordstrom's is known for its level of service. They really, really value the customer. And it's the same for us. Those are our clients, those are our customers. And so if they have a legitimate complaint, if you go to the service desk in a store, you want to be heard. Same thing with your congregants.
Who's the us you're talking about?
The body of Christ, us.
I mean, you said it's like we believe they owe us. Who's the us?
The church. Yeah, the church.
I mean, but the congregants are the church.
Absolutely, they are the church.
How can they?
But does every congregant see themselves as the church? If they get mad, if something happens, if they have a bad experience, do they see it as the us?
So many things, just a few people control everything, and we want to make sure they know they're part of everything.
Yes.
They make it a us and them.
The pastor,
And the board,
the leaders.
Mhm.
And we're the church. But it's,
We're all the same, but
It's divided.
from an operational perspective, they don't see it that way. And we have to be cognizant of that. Yes.
Basically, it's more like what you're talking about, like with the service industry. They're the customer. If they see something wrong with what's going on, they want to correct it, and they, a lot of times, do not care how it gets corrected, and sometimes they're going to be ranting about it, and we have to show right then that we are the church. The pastor, the person who's receiving the complaint, we have to listen to it. Because if we do not, then they're going to take their service elsewhere.
Yes. But when they get out of church, too, they're going to tell 10 or 15 people. They're going to be on the phone. Yeah. They're going to tell. So Absolutely, you have to treat it that way.
Go to this church.
Yeah, they did this, and it's going to be blown out of proportion. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you know, people have options. That's the bigger point. People have options. They don't have to come to your church even if they're a believer. Yeah, there's a oversupply of churches. And what's going to make yours different? What's going to make people compelled to come to worship with you? The average person is going to pass 10 churches on their way to your church. And so if you think about them in that perspective, that you want to give them radical hospitality, you want to make sure that their experience is very pleasant, that's thinking like a business. How do you get a repeat customer? Everyone knows that it costs more money to go out and get a customer than to keep the one you have. Same thing with the church. Just imagine if you kept everyone and you didn't have to spend on marketing.
I understand that in some ways we've gotten that wrong. But what you're describing has been part of the church from the very beginning. It's not really a business. It was something we actually invented before business was business.
Okay.
I mean, the church had invented this idea, this reality.
Then how did we do with our invention?
Ask the question again.
So you say that the church invented this whole concept, and I'm saying, so if the church invented it, how did it handle its invention? Because if you're the first and you invented it and you're doing it right, you should be swelling. You shouldn't even have seats.
What I said was,
Mm-hmm.
in some ways we've gotten it wrong. Over time, things can become corrupted. Just as over time, business has become corrupted. So my concern is, yes, we have business practice in the church. We always have had business practices in the church. We have not always done those practices well. But when you say that church is a big business, to me that also carries a connotation of the corruption in business as it is today.
Okay. So I don't see all businesses as being corrupt. So there are some businesses that we can look at and admire. Amazon, Groves, Starbucks, pays for all of its employees' health benefits. Okay. Okay. You finish.
Go ahead, man.
So there are organizations that we can look at and admire. And we can look at them as a business and what are they doing right that we can mimic.
That's just like us started out very strong.
Yes.
We didn't pay attention to what was
Yes.
going on.
Blockbuster is the same.
And so what happened? They went out of business.
Yeah. There are a lot of churches that were big churches and thriving churches that are no longer open. So if we're not thinking about it, so, you know, I invited you when we started to go back and think about this. You don't have to accept it now, but at least be open to the idea. If we're doing everything right, we wouldn't need this. If everything is right, we wouldn't have churches closing. Yeah. So we can think about it. You don't have to accept it now, but at least be open to the seed being planted. Yeah. Yes, sir.
The capital campaign listed there on the chart, that seems small. Is that one of several capital campaigns? And is capital campaign just not an emphasis in the overall budgeting process?
So those are the expenses. And this is the third year of a campaign. So in the third year, you don't have to spend as much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the 20,000 is enough to cover
The last year of the campaign.
any idea, I mean, I hate to, but any idea where it started at? When you all started the initiative to do this third year, where the budget was for the first year? Because oftentimes churches are like, we're not gonna spend money to get money. And to me, that sounds,
And so when we think about it as a business, you got to spend money to make money. You got to do it smartly. But if you start a capital campaign, there are a number of things that go into it, from the architectural renderings of whatever the vision is, to the private phase where you're having dinners with your major prospective donors to share the vision with them, collateral materials, if you have a capital campaign consultant, all of those things go into it.
How do we learn how to do that? You know, how do we learn to get folk to accept, look, we need a team to go sit down with some prospective persons in the community that can give to this capital campaign. We need, a lot of time, and I know it might just be a South Carolina thing, a lot of times folk don't see that that is a key component to the process of building up capital, is to talk to folk, sit down, have a cup of tea or you know, a medium rare steak or something.
I think the more you can plan before you present it, the better. So the more time you spend in the private phase, getting your pitch, getting your language, getting your vision together to share, the more they can buy into it. So you can't plan, in the public, you've got to do that in private, what's called a private phase. And you really, if it's a 3-year or 2-year campaign, a year of that is in the private phase. And you have to make sure you have the resources to start a capital campaign so that you can do those things in the private phase. But we're more than welcome to come back and do a seminar on capital campaign and fundraising. But I think the more that you do the financial literacy and your giving is up, the generosity is up, the less you need capital campaigns. I'm going to move on a little bit so that we don't run out of time. We'll do questions at the end. So how many of you understand the difference between restricted and unrestricted funds? Okay. And so the unrestricted funds are the most critical thing because you can use those to cover operations. And capital campaigns, quite honestly, can cannibalize your regular tithes and offerings. Because at the end of the day, so for us, one thing that we do is we send out statements each month. So the same way you send out, the cable company sends their statement and people open it and they pay it. We send a statement that shows your pledge, how much you've paid, and how much you have left. And whenever we send those statements, there are people who will say, oh, when I gave 2 months ago, I meant for that to go to the capital campaign. And then that generosity moves from unrestricted, allowing you to cover salaries and have the lights on, to restricted funds that can only be used for that capital campaign's purpose. So there is a tug of war there between restricted and unrestricted. And your unrestricted, your net income, net treasure determines how much money you have in your bank. So if you think about it, if you spent more than you got in that month, how do you cover that? Your bank balance. So you have to make sure that your net income, I put together this example here so that you can see if you start off with $659,000 in January in your bank account and you start having losses, your treasure was less than your expenses, you can see how it impacts your cash balance. And you can get all the way down from $659,000 to $123,000. So you want to do these types of analysis. And I know that there may be some discomfort around this, but it's a business. And this is what businesses do. If it's a publicly traded company, they've got to report out their shareholders. Shareholders get this information. If it's a privately held company, then the owners get this information. You can share this information with the congregation, depending on how transparent your culture is. But somebody's seeing this information. Yes, sir.
Financial software you all use?
We use ACS.
My suspicion is a lot of the churches are still operating out of the
Well, you definitely want accounting software. And, you know, no matter how small you are, you can have QuickBooks. But the accounting software will also allow you to have an audit trail too. So you can, if you ever wanted to go back and look and see every transaction, it will be captured in your accounting software. So even when someone gives cash, we take that and we put it into we also use Community Church Builder, CCB, as our software, our donor-based software. And even then, we have to take that money that's received and then transfer it into our accounting software. But you cannot run a church and organization the same way you run your personal bank account with a check registry. You need accounting software. We go as far as to get audited by a CPA firm each year and share that audit. And that CPA firm is looking to make sure that nothing is done that's incorrect, unethical, or they will not sign off and say that your financials present fairly and honestly. And the first thing they do is they grab all the pastor's transactions and all of mine for the year, and they sit with that. But it gives our worship community a level of comfort in giving and knowing that the money is being used correctly. And I'm not saying that every organization is large enough to have a CPA firm, but every organization should at least have accounting software. And even when you have account team in their accounting, there are account team procedures that we have that are written. In order to be on that team, we do a background check, and they have to sign off on those procedures, and the auditors review to make sure that we have the correct procedures. So no two people can be alone with the money. That's part of your account team procedure. And we keep a policeman in the room with them as well. And another analysis that I like to do is our average weekly attendance. So I calculated, and I know what our average giving unit is per person who comes to Impact. And if your attendance is up or down, you can calculate to see what that means for your bottom line. And I compare it to the year before to see how we're trending as well. And you can, I put this together to show you, but you can see what your total difference is at any point in time. September, I put 2,406. And if you know that what your average giving unit is, you multiply that by your average giving unit. And that negative number you see is the impact of decreased attendance. So when your customers, your clients, the congregation is not satisfied and they stop coming, it translates into this number. When you're giving them radical hospitality, and I said people come to church for the preaching, the praising, the singing, and the prayer. And when that's on and popping and your membership increases, you know what your average giving unit is, and you can multiply that out and know the impact on your business. And we can't be afraid. It doesn't mean we're unholy if we're thinking about it in these terms. But the church is an organization that has to be viable. It has to thrive, or you can't bring souls to Christ. If you can't afford to have the lights on and the heat on in the winter, nobody's going to come worship there.
That's right.
Yes. Glad you asked that. First-time visitor. So we track the first time someone comes, first-time giver, visitor, giver. But if someone, and I shared this yesterday, if they give for the first time, we send them the card, we thank them, we ask them to come back. But we track the number of people who come for the first time as well. And so you need to really be on top of your business, just like this. To know how many people are coming for the first time. To thank people for, coming and supporting you. Sometimes if you go to stores, if you buy for the first time, they have your information or online. You may get something from them. That's the world we live in. That's what people are accustomed to. The church has to do the same. There was a question. So, I said to go back and think about these things. We've heard a lot over the last 2 days. Sometimes we're thinking, we're in our heads, my church is too small. My culture is different. My DNA is different. But I want you to just, when you're away from here and you're meditating, think about what you can do. You may not be able to do everything that we've shown you, but even if there's one thing that makes a difference in your ministry, just do it. Take that leap of faith. And don't get into analysis paralysis where you're just thinking about all the reasons why it can't work. Take that leap of faith. If we're truly believers, take that leap of faith. And there are a lot of churches that have closed or are on the brinks of closing because they can't think about their operations in a different way. But we really do run businesses. Our product is salvation. It's the love of Christ. But at the end of the day, it is a business. Any questions? Well, thank you for your time.